So again, another little review. When we talk about just anything scientific and how we classify it, we talk about this kind of system of classification right here. So kingdom is the top. You can have the animal kingdom, you can kingdom, a protist, a bacteria kingdom. We are in the animal kingdom. So mangroves and seagrass would be in the plant kingdom, right? But we are now in the animal kingdom. And we're talking about phylums. So as you guys can see from this list, phylums are very high up here. So the phylum is a pretty big umbrella term. It's not very specific. So even though corals and sea anemones and jellyfish are in the same phylum, they're actually very, very different because after that they branch off into different categories here. So think of it as stairs. So as you start at the top of the stairs, you're really high up. Then you slowly get lower and lower and lower to the very specific organism here. So when I say phylum, remember I'm talking about this. I will be talking about classes, so that's the third level there. All right, guys, going to go ahead and get started on our first phylum. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with our first phylum of the day. We're going to be talking about echinoderms. So everyone say echinoderm. What is an echinoderm? What's an example? Is it an octopus or is a sea urchin an example of an echinoderm? Go ahead and make that vote on the bottom as to what you think an echinoderm is. While you guys are voting, this worksheet right here you can complete as we go through the lesson. I'll be explaining and bringing up every single organism on this sheet. So after you voted, if you do have this, go ahead and look at it so you know what to listen out for, some keywords. All right, and then all you're doing with this one is, so you're looking, so I have sea urchin and octopus right here. So the answer to this question, you'll be able to put either the echinoderm here or here, depending on what I tell you is the answer. And then once you guys have filled all this out, you can go ahead and color the animals, and you can also check the answers on our blog. We posted the answer sheet for this. An echinoderm is a sea urchin. So your sea urchin are echinoderms. So you go ahead and write that in there if you would like. All right, so your echinoderm, it's Greek for hedgehog skin. So that kind of makes sense when you think about a sea urchin. So guys, a sea urchin looks just like this right here. It's very pointy. You definitely don't want to step on these things because it's going to hurt and you're not going to have a good day. They're pointy like that. They have radial symmetry, so you can kind of fold them in every direction. There's about 7,000 living echinoderms species. They do not have blood. So this is a really cool fun fact. So echinoderms do not have blood. Their blood is actually seawater. So they have a vascular system made completely out of seawater. And that's how they regulate everything going on in their body. Now they can regenerate body parts. So we know, like with starfish, if its arm gets cut off, it can regenerate that. And some feed by ejecting stomach through their mouth. So I'll explain that in a second. Other examples of echinoderms. So you have the sea urchin. You also have sea stars. You have sea cucumbers right here. And another example is a sand dollar. And a sea skid, so things like this, okay? So these are all echinoderms. Alrighty, guys. So let's talk a little bit more about sea stars. So you call them starfish. You can call them sea stars. If you call them a starfish, please just know that they are not fish. They are invertebrates. They are definitely not fish. So sea stars. All right. So I did also get a few questions in our event page. So I'm going to be answering those questions as I go. So sea stars can live to 35 years old. The largest known starfish is called the sunflower star. It can be 40 inches long and 11 pounds. And it can have the most arms. The sunflower star can have 24 arms. So go ahead at the end of this lesson, Google sunflower star. They're very cool. They can have 24 arms, 11 pounds. They have in the northern Pacific a lot. So they're more deeper ocean sea stars. There are about 2,000 species of sea stars. Most of them only have 5 arms, so we don't call them tentacles, we call them arms. All their vital organs are mostly in their arms. So their vital organs that they need are located in their arms. And again, they can regenerate. So if you cut off an arm, they can grow a new one. Some species of sea stars can actually grow a whole new body from just a little piece of arm. So think about if this little arm would get cut off, some species can actually grow a whole new body just from that little arm piece. You do have sea stars with 6 arms as well, so that's pretty cool. And if you give it enough time, so their arms will start off to be much smaller than the rest of their body. As you give it time, though, their arms will look normal and they will look like a totally normal sea star, and you'll never know that they got one of their arms messed. Okay, so how sea stars eat. So it's very cool. Underneath that sea star, they have a mouth, and what they do is they actually eject, so their stomach comes out of their body, and their stomach goes around their prey. So what they'll do is they'll cover their food in their stomach, and then that stomach will dissolve and make the food all mushy, and then it'll bring it back into its body. So sea stars will actually eat by almost kind of like spitting out their stomach onto an object, making it all mushy, and then sucking it back in. So that's really crazy. Again, their blood is made out of seawater, so sea stars do not have blood. Think about it this way, guys. If they had blood and they got an arm cut off, it wouldn't work, right? So their blood is actually just seawater. They do not have a brain. They have what we call a neural ring, and that helps control their nerves. They have little feet called tube feet. And on the tip of each arm, they actually have a little eye. That eye isn't very helpful. It can just detect different light. It can't see color or anything like that. It's not like our eyes that we have as humans. All right. So let's move on to our next phylum, the mollusk. All right, so here's the next question for you guys. What is a mollusk? Is it a clam or a coral? So mollusks are, clams are a mollusk. So mollusk or mollusca is Latin for soft. So these are more softer animals, at least in some regard. They're the largest marine phylum. 23% of all marine organisms are mollusks. They use their limbs for a variety of purposes. You can find them for 550 million years ago, and your mollusks fossils are commonly used by paleontologists. So people that study fossils, they definitely use a lot of mollusks in history to figure out what was going on in the time. They are soft bodies, like I mentioned, and they usually have a head and a foot region. And most of them possess what we call a mantle and a body cavity, which is used for breathing. So, guys, in a whole, your mollusks are going to be your snails, your slugs, your squid, your clams, and your octopus. These are all mollusks. So now we're going to get a little more specific. So you can go ahead and get this worksheet out if you have it. So how this worksheet works here is we are talking about the mollusk phylum. So what you're going to do is you have all these things here. You have a word bank where you fill in with the rectangles, and these you can color and cut out and put to their corresponding little area. So again, mollusk is going to be here, and I'm going to teach you about 3 different classes or different types of mollusks. And 1, 2, 3. I gave you guys a little hint under there. So this one says this class has a hinged shell. This class has their stomach and foot connected. This class has a head and many arms. So as we work, you'll be able to fill in the word bank here, and then you'll be able to see what type of organisms would go into each category. As you work on that, you'll be able to work on it when we're done with the video too, as I'm talking, and then you can check your answers on our blog. So again, guys, I'll show you this again. We're in that let me see, there we go. We're in that animal kingdom. We're in the phylum, the mollusk phylum, and now we're going to start talking about different classes, okay? So the first one we're going to talk about are the bivalves. So the bivalves are hinged. It's two shells and they're hinged together. It is Latin for two leaves of a door. So your bivalves, think two. So bi two usually. So they have two components and they're hinged together. So these are going to be your clams, your mussels, your oysters, your scallops. Those are all going to be your bivalves. Okay. Now they have compressed bodies enclosed by a shell. They are filter feeders usually, and their shells are made out of calcium carbonate. They have bilateral symmetry. There's about 9,000 living species of bivalves. And again, clams, mussels, oysters, and scallops. So you can go ahead and look at this worksheet if you have it and figure out which ones would be bivalves and find which category it would belong to here. Alrighty. So the next one is going to be your gastropods or your gastropoda. So your gastropods, it's Greek for stomach foot. So their stomach and their foot are all kind of one entity. There are 60,000 to 75,000 known living species. They have torsion, which is where the body coils to one side during development. So these are going to be your snails, your sea slugs, your sea hares, and your nudibranchs. So go ahead, kind of talk about this a little bit. One feature that I'm going to talk about is the conch shell. Here is an example of a conch shell. This one's very old. This is a queen conch. When they are not as old, you'll see they'll have bright pinks in them. They're very, very pretty. So this is a queen conch. We have right here, we have another conch shell here. All right, and I have a little whelk as well. So these are all gastropods. So as you can see here, they kind of have this spiral formation there. And inside, if I were to cut this in half, it would actually be a spiral. And that's how the snail will actually hide within here. So guys, they're born with these little shells, and the shells get bigger and bigger as they grow. They're not like hermit crabs where they go find a new shell. They stay with their shell for life. They can't move to another shell. So as they grow older, the shell gets bigger and bigger, and inside it's all spiraled so they can shrink in. Your conchs especially are used very commonly for food, decoration, musical instruments. They can actually create pearls. I actually have a little necklace that's got a conch shell pearl in it. And guys, this right here, so at the end of their body, at the end of their foot, they have this operculum. So if you guys remember our fish anatomy lesson, they have that covering their gills. So what happens is a conch is really just like one giant muscle, and their stomach is attached to their foot, and they use their little foot to move them around in the ocean. You can definitely look at some videos on that. It's kind of funny to watch. But they use that little foot muscle just to kind of push along. When they feel threatened, they actually have this on the bottom of that foot muscle, and when they feel threatened, they will shrink in to their shell, and it's kind of like a door. So nothing can get in, and that's how they protect themselves. So they'll be out, kind of pushing along, scared, they'll shrink in like that. Another cool thing about these guys is their eggs. So this is what the eggs look for, like these conchs and gastropods here. So it's really kind of crinkly, and this is what their eggs look like. And if you find them on the beach, you might actually find tiny little conch shells within these little egg casings here. A lot of you have probably seen these washed up on the beach. These are usually like the egg casings for snails, and there'll be tiny, tiny, dozens of tiny little conch shells and whatever species it is inside of it. Another really fun fact about conch is that if you were born in Key West, which is where we are located right now, if you were born in Key West, you were actually called a conch. So I was born here in Key West, so I'm technically a conch. It's also the mascot for our high school, so the mascot for the high school is the conchs as well. So down here, the conch is a very important thing. It's also protected. So we cannot hunt them. We cannot kill them in any way, shape, or form. We cannot take them from the ocean. So they're very well protected here, which is good. Another side note is all these shells, like I said, how they grow over time. Think of it like your fingernail. So your fingernail grows over time. That's what their shells are like. So another example of a gastropod. So even though it's related to a sea snail, it doesn't have that shell on it. So these guys do not have shells. And I'm going to tell you about the nudibranchs. So the nudibranchs are super duper cool. One of my favorite things in the ocean. They look like this. So this is a nudibranch. It means naked gills. So again, guys, this is a gastropod, but it does not have any type of shell on it. There's about 3,000 species, and they're known for, let's see if you can see this. That's not too, yeah, that's better. Okay, they are known for their brilliant, so they have a lot of bright, pretty neon colors. When they're first born, they do actually have a shell, but they get rid of that pretty early on. Some of them can be venomous, so some of them will have parts in their body out that are venomous, so that way nothing can eat them. They do not have a mantle cavity like some other invertebrates do. Some can camouflage. And a cool thing about your nudibranchs is they actually take in chloroplast from plants, which is how plants actually photosynthesize and make themselves their food. So the nudibranch will consume the chloroplast from whatever that marine plant, and it'll make food for themselves. So that's really cool. Another example of a gastropod here is the sea hare. So this is right here, sea hare. There we go. So this is a sea hare here. It just looks like a larger nudibranch. It kind of looks like a hare or a rabbit. So guys, you call rabbits hares sometimes. So it kind of looks like that. You see it looks like it's got little bunny ears there. Perfect. Okay, so then they have those horn-like appendages there. And they can follow very faint scents. So they actually have a pretty good sense of smell. And their color will actually go along with what type of seaweed that they are eating. So this one eats more lighter yellow, greener colored seaweed and seagrass. If it eats redder seagrass or seaweed, it'll be more of a reddish color. They also release ink when they're scared. So when they're scared, they will release an ink, and the ink is actually very fragrant. It doesn't smell bad at all, and it's like a purplish color. Alrighty, so guys, the next class I'm going to talk about are the cephalopods. So hopefully you guys are able to fill out at least 2 of these now. We're going to move on to cephalopods. A cephalopod is Greek for head feet. They have bilateral symmetry. They have a head and a set of arms. So a big thing about these guys is they don't have tentacles. So your tentacles are your jellies, your corals, your sea anemones. These have arms, so we call them arms. Many can ink. They have a beak that's kind of made out of chitin, so they all have a beak-like mouth. It's very, very tiny though, but it's very, very hard. It can crush this. They are the most intelligent invertebrate. Their brain is protected by cartilage. They mostly have very advanced vision, with the exception of one animal that I'll tell you about. Most are actually colorblind. So these guys use a lot of camouflage. They blend in with their surroundings, but it's crazy to think that they're actually colorblind. And most are moved forward through what we call jet propulsion. So they're using the water to go forward. So if you haven't already guessed, your cephalopods are going to be your nautilus, your octopus, your squid, your cuttlefish. Those guys are going to be your cephalopods. Before I talk about the individual species, I want to talk a little bit about how they change color, because it's really cool. So again, guys, they are colorblind and they can't really see color. They have these color changing cells called chromatophores. So they have these cells in their skin, chromatophores, and each chromatophore contains a sac of pigment with different colors. So think of like a balloon that has different colors in it, and when the sac expands, the color is more visible. So think of like a white balloon, and as you expand it, you'll be able to see the color more. Think of a white balloon with a different color inside of it. As you expand it, you'll be able to see it better and better. So the sac inside that chromatophore, as it expands, you see the color more. When it gets smaller, you don't see the color as well. They also have iridophores and leucophores that create iridescent colors and also mirror back colors in the environment. So they have those two other things in their body that will create sparkling color and will also mirror back everything that's around them. So that's how they help camouflage against an item, is those cells in their skin are mirroring what's next to them. And can also change the texture of their skin using papillae. So they can also make their skin look more rough to blend with maybe a coral, or to look more smooth to blend in with sand or something like that. So these guys are colorblind. They use they're able to detect the light and the cells in the water. They have a much more advanced way of seeing than we do. It's still a little unknown as to how they can exactly change a certain color, but that's, you know, kind of the basis of how they are able to do that. So the first organism I want to talk to you guys about is this really, really cool animal here. It's called the chambered nautilus. So you guys might have even seen their shells in like a museum. Let me see if I can get this. There we go. That is a nautilus. So guys, it is one of the few shell invertebrates that live in the water column. So these guys don't live on sand. They're openly swimming in the water. Let me see if this is yeah, there we go. All right, their chambers are actually filled with gas. So that's why it's called the chambered nautilus. Inside their shell, there's little compartments, and those are all filled with gas. So its body only makes up like this area right here. The rest is all compartments filled with gas to make them buoyant in the water, so that way they aren't sinking or floating. They can have 90 arms, so much more than octopus and squid. And they can live to be about 20 years old. Now, the chambered nautilus does not have very good eyesight. They have little dots on their eyes that we call pinhole eyes, so they act like a pinhole camera. So they really can only just detect light. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about squid and cuttlefish. So this is a squid here, and this is a cuttlefish. So they're very cute. Okay, but they look very similar. So I'm going to tell you a few differences. So first off is the squid. The squid has an internal shell. So inside of this area here, the mantle, it's got a pen. We call it a pen. It kind of feels like plastic. Honestly, it's not plastic, but it feels like it. So they have this pen inside of their mantle to help give it the structure it needs. So again, it's very lightweight, so it's not heavy, it won't sink them. The largest squid species is the giant squid. It can be 40 feet long. The smallest squid is the pygmy squid, which is less than an inch long. So you have 40 feet versus an inch. There are about 300 species of squid. And they have a circular pupil. So they have a circular eye. Definitely kind of hard to see. There you go. Circular pupil. All right, let's talk about the cuttlefish. So the cuttlefish here, okay, they have an internal structure as well. So inside that mantle body called a cuttle bone, and it's made out of calcium. If any of you have a pet bird, you know that that's actually a very popular thing to get for birds. So you actually buy that structure that's found inside of a cuttlefish at a pet store. It's called a cuttle bone, and it's helpful for birds to help, you know, kind of smooth out their beak. So guys, a lot of people do kill cuttlefish for that cuttle bone for birds. The largest cuttlefish is the Australian giant cuttlefish, which is 20 inches long. The smallest cuttlefish is the flamboyant and the dwarf cuttlefish, which are only about 3 inches long. They communicate using flashes of color and patterns, so they can actually communicate with other types of cuttlefish using flashes of colors and patterns. And these guys, if you look, they have a W-shaped pupil. So the squid have a circular pupil. These guys have a squiggly W-shaped pupil. Helps them see lighting better. All right, now everyone's favorite cephalopod, the octopus. So guys, this is the octopus here. They have 8 arms. Again, we don't call them tentacles, we call them arms. The largest octopus is the giant Pacific octopus, which has a 15-foot arm span. So remember that wingspan lesson we did with birds? The giant octopus can stretch across 15 feet long. The smallest octopus is the octopus wolfie. It's 2.5 inches. The octopus has 3 hearts and 9 brains. So guys, think about that. 3 hearts and 9 brains. These are some of the most intelligent organisms that we have. Each arm has a brain-like feature on it. So each arm kind of has a brain type of organ in it to help them kind of really just move around and explore things. Octopus can regrow arms if they lose one, kind of like a starfish, but they don't regrow them as a starfish would. The giant octopus can live to be 5 years old, but most only live to about 6 months old. So they don't really have a long lifespan. They can lay 200,000 eggs at a time. So the octopus, you can actually find a lot of stories about them at different aquariums. There's a lot of books written about octopus. They're very, very smart. You guys have seen Finding Dory. You know, Hank is definitely getting out and moving around. That's actually a true story. Octopus have been known to escape their aquariums and go explore different areas. Some aquariums have had their octopus climb out of their own tank, go into other exhibits, and eat the fish, other organisms in the other exhibits. There's Inky the octopus, which I believe was in New Zealand at an aquarium there, I'm not sure. But Inky the octopus actually escaped his tank, got into the pipe system, and went into the pipes into the ocean. So octopus are very, very intelligent. After this, I definitely recommend looking up videos of octopus. They've got them where they put their food in jars. They can open up the jars. They are very, very cool animals. All right, so hopefully you guys have all the tools, all the knowledge now to fill out and complete the worksheet here. Give it your shot. Go ahead. When you're done, you can check the answers on our blog. So let's move on to one of our final phylums. We are now going to talk about platyhelminthes. So what do you think is a platyhelminthine? So these guys are your flatworms. This is kind of a really weird phylum, and there's not very many common things that are go into this phylum. So platyhelminthe is or flatworm. They are bilateral symmetry. They are not segmented, so that's the difference between them and annelids. The phylum we learned about, they do not have segmented bodies. They do not have a body cavity. They do not have a specialized circulatory or respiratory organ. They're very, very simple animals. The oxygen passes through their body through diffusion. The tapeworm, so some of you probably have heard about the tapeworm. It goes into the organs. The tapeworm is the largest species of platyhelminthes. It can be 30 meters long. So that's the largest one. I'll give you an example of a flatworm that we have in the ocean. It is a little deceptive. It's a little confusing because it does kind of look like a nudibranch. However, the nudibranch is not as flat, and the nudibranch usually has more horns and other things sticking out of its body. This is a very, as you can see, it's a very, very flat animal. So it can be colorful, but they're very flat. They don't have any antenna-like or horn-like looking things. They don't have gills or anything like that. So they're very flat. For those that have taken a biology class, you also probably have learned about planaria. So planaria is a type of flatworm. It's very tiny. In a lot of biology class, you do a lot of experiments on planaria as well. I know I did it in college. We had to do a lab on them. So you guys, back to this worksheet really quickly. That's planaria right there. You can go ahead and put that in there. All right, so let's go on to our final phylum. What is porifera? So porifera are sponges or a sea sponge. So they've got their own phylum. So it means pore bearing. So you guys know what pores are. If you look at your skin, we all have little pores on our face, on our skin. That's how we sweat. They're like kind of like little holes in our face, in our skin, not actual holes, but kind of like it. Think of that. Now these sponges all have little tiny holes, and they're called pores, and they have channels, and that allows water to flow. So they can't actively hunt. They can't move. They have to allow the water to flow through the system, and that's actually how they eat. They have nervous system, no digestive system, no circulatory system. They have no organs. They are very, very simple animals, and they were the first to branch off the evolutionary tree from all animals. So they kind of broke off very early on. They have an internal skeleton called spicules, but they are not bones. A lot of scientists research their spicules to identify different species. So again, guys, here's just two types of sponges that we have here. I got a question, are the sponges, are sea sponges the same that you use for bathing? Yes and no. So you can actually use certain types of sea sponges as something to wash your body with or to wash your dishes. It is not the same as your traditional like dish sponge. So SpongeBob, for example, he's actually a dish sponge. For whatever reason, they decided to not make him a real sponge. They made him into a dish sponge. But if you've seen SpongeBob and you know what his parents look like, his parents are much more to an actual sponge. You can use a sea sponge to bathe and do dishes. However, the sponging industry isn't the best. There's not the best practices that go along with it. Some people will actually pour gasoline in the water to kill off sponges, and that also kills off everything else. Don't necessarily recommend completely going after sponges to wash your dishes and to wash your body. Try to get something a little bit more sustainable than that. Maybe just a washcloth or something. That way you can just wash it. Another cool thing that scientists can do with sponges, and you can look up a video about this after, but they can actually inject the sponge with like a dye, green for example. That's the video I've seen. And you can watch how all of a sudden it will come out through the top. So if I were to inject green down the side of the sponge here, it would start funneling out the top like that. So that's a really cool thing to kind of look up. Just look up sea sponges and you'll probably find a video of that really early on. So guys, that's the end of all of my phylums that I'm going to teach you about today. I do just want to finish off with explaining to you just how important these things are. So all of these invertebrates actually really help us with medicine. I already told you about the horseshoe crab and how we use their blood to test different medical equipment. But it goes a lot beyond. So my dad actually worked as a diver, and he dove around the world collecting marine invertebrates for cancer research. So he went and collected all these invertebrates, and they actually would test them to see if they could help treat different types of cancers. So I'm going to read out a few things for you guys quickly to kind of explain to you just how important they are. I've got this little medicine list. Certain species of sponges are used to treat diabetes, arthritis, osteoporosis. There's a species of soft coral used to treat Parkinson's. There's a species of sponge that they use to treat Alzheimer's. Let's see here. All right, they've got different types of mollusks that they use to treat cancers. A sponge treats leukemia. Let's see here. Another sponge treats colon cancer. And there's another type of sponge that treats leukemia as well. And that's just a very short list that I have. And I don't think that list has been updated in years. But just right there, sponges and soft corals and a bunch of other things that we have in the invertebrates and the marine invertebrates can treat a lot of things that we've all probably come into contact with. Cancer, Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, diabetes. All those things have probably affected us to some degree, and we can thank marine invertebrates for really at least helping us treat these things to our best ability. The marine invertebrates hold a lot of answers to a lot of medicine that we need. So they're very important to us, and we need to make sure that we keep these around as long as possible because they really are a very, very important resource, not just for medicine, but for the food chain, for the ecosystems. The sponges clean the water. The crustaceans are, you know, very important for food source for other animals. So even though they seem very small and some people may not think that they're that important, they actually are very, very important, and without them, we really wouldn't have a functioning marine ecosystem, and we really wouldn't be doing well as humans either.